Probably one of the most powerful aspects of Microsoft Windows is the way you can share resources. Now, I'm going to have a lot of episodes that cover this, but to get us started, I want to create a scenario. What we have here is one computer. In fact, this is the only computer that I have at my company. And on this one computer, when we shoot a video, we save it onto my E drive. I've got one little folder called Video, and we put all these videos in here. And there are two groups of people who work at my company. There are reviewers and there are editors. And what I want to do is set this up so that when a reviewer sits down at this computer, he can review the videos, but he can't accidentally delete them or do something like that. And then if he logs out and an editor comes in and fires up his editing software, he can go ahead and edit those videos. So what we're talking about is setting up sharing on a single system. There is no networking involved here at all. This is really the best way to begin your understanding, because really what we're going to be talking about here are NTFS permissions. So now that you've got the basics set up, let me show you how I've got my system up and running right now. So first of all, what I want to show you are the 4 users that I've made. I've made Harry, Jerry, Rich, and Tom. Now if you take a look over in groups, I've made 2 groups, editor and reviewer. If we open up editor, you'll see that Harry and Jerry are members of the editor group. And if we take a look at reviewer, how about if I click that just once, there we go. We can see that Rich and Tom are members of the reviewer group. Now if you take a look over on I've got a new drive in here, E drive, and you'll see that right now I have one folder in there called videos, and inside there are 4 movies. So these are movies that I need these 4 guys to look at. 2 of them are reviewers to make sure I'm saying the right stuff, and 2 of them are editors to make me look good. So what we're going to do right now is go through the process of setting this up so that the reviewers can see, but they can't accidentally delete or edit, and that the editors can see it and edit it, and they can even delete them if they need to, because, well, they're editors and that's what editors do. So let's start by, well, doing it wrong. So take a look right now. Here's one movie. So I'm going to right click on here. I'm going to select properties and I'm going to go to security. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to add one of those users. So I'm going to add, and in this case I'm going to pick Harry. And you can see when I click check names, Harry gets underlined, which means that is a real username. And now what I want you to look at are these options right here. These are the actual NTFS permissions. So these NTFS permissions, you can see we have full control, modify, read and execute, read, write, hold on, that's not all of them, and then special permissions. So at this moment, I don't want to talk about exactly what these mean, but I want to make sure you understand how we get to them and how we can change them if we want. So right now we've got Harry selected, and he has read and execute and read. Okay, so I will explain those 2. Read and execute is an NTFS permission that really applies mainly to executable files. If I had an executable program in there, then if I check that, Harry would be able to not only read that file, but he'd actually run it as well. Read is more for data files. So if I check read in here, Harry can actually look at it. He could open it up in an editor, but if he hit file save, it wouldn't let him do it. All right, so we've got this set up. I'm going to hit OK, and then I want to talk about this for a minute, because we've got a couple of problems here. First of all, what if Harry quits? If Harry quits, I'm going to have to go in here and take out all these NTFS permissions. So that's a bit of an issue. The second issue I have is, what if I add more videos to this folder? Well, then I'm going to start running into a situation where I'm going to have to be setting these NTFS permissions up for every little file I bring in. So what that does is brings up what Microsoft calls a best practice. Yes, you can do it this way, but there are more efficient ways to do it. In general, what we do is we create users, we put the users into groups, and then we give NTFS permissions to those groups. In general, when we're setting up those NTFS permissions, we set them up on a per folder basis for individual groups. Let me show you how this all works. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply NTFS permissions not to an individual file, but to a folder. So I'm going to right click on this folder, and I'm going to go to properties. Do you see sharing? You ignore that. That is a networking thing. We cover that in other episodes. There's no network here. Remember, there's only one computer. So we go to security. Now what I want to do is I'm going to add, in this case, reviewer, and hit check names, make sure the underline appears. And you'll see that reviewer is on here. By default, it gets read and execute, list folder contents, and read. List folder contents is actually a very interesting NTFS permission. Without it, you could get to those files, but you can't actually open the folder and see what's in there. So it's kind of an interesting NTFS permission, but an important one. So what we've done here is we set up reviewer to have those particular permissions. So I'm going to hit OK. Let's go through this process one more time, except this time we're going to let the editors in there. So by default, you'll see editors just get read and execute, list folder contents, and read permission. What we're going to do is give them the modify permission as well. They have to have that so that they can edit these videos and then save them in the same folder with the same name. So we hit apply, and we hit OK. And now we've got a basic setup. And this is a very common type of setup that you'll see on a more serious system that has a lot of users working on it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something called inheritance. Let me show you how this works. First of all, when we look at the properties of video, you're going to see, do you see this guy right here? That's me. I'm actually the person who created this folder. I am the owner of this folder. So by default, whoever actually creates a folder can set up what other people can do to it. So as the owner, I've got a lot of power. Now, what I want you to do is take a look. When we see editor here, you're going to see that there are two columns here, allow and deny. Let me show you how this works. What I'm going to do is go into videos, and I'm going to pick any one of these. Now remember, I have not set any NTFS permissions for this guy. But when I go into properties and I go into security, you'll see that editor right here has the same permissions that we had set earlier, but there's a big difference. Look at the color of the checkboxes. They're grayed out. What's happening here is when you set NTFS permissions for any one object, anything else you create in there automatically gets those same permissions. We call this inheritance. Here, I make it even cooler than that. Watch this. So I'm going to right click right now, new folder. I'm going to call it Timmy. Now, I just made this folder. Poof, I just made him. So when we go into properties and go into security, you're going to see that these are all the same permissions that we had before. Here's me. I've got full control because I'm the owner. Here's editors with their modify permission. And there's reviewers with the same permissions we set before. And that's the power of inheritance. Anything that you put into one folder will automatically take on the NTFS permissions of that particular folder. So let's go ahead and take a minute right now and let's make sure you understand the basic NTFS permissions. NTFS permissions vary whether you have a folder or a file. Let's go through those. For a folder, first of all, full control means you can do anything you want. Modify enables you to read, write, and delete both files and subfolders within that folder. Read and execute enables you to see the contents of the folder and any subfolders, as well as run executable programs. List folder contents enables you to see the contents of the folder and any subfolders. Read enables you to view a folder's contents and open any file in the folder. And last, write enables you to write to files and create new files and folders. NTFS permissions for a file start with full control, and as you might imagine, it enables you to do anything you want. Modify enables you to read, write, and delete that file. Read and execute allows you to open and run the file. Read allows you to open the file. And last, write enables you to open and write to the file. So what happens if I start putting stuff into a folder that I've got particular permissions set with? Well, let's take a look. So if we take a look, here's my videos folder. So we'll go back up one more. And we look at our security. And we'll see that editor and reviewer have their NTFS permissions. Now, what I'm going to do now is let's go back into the videos. And let's just say I'm going to create a new file and I just throw it in there. So for here, I'm just going to do new bitmap image. I'm just going to make a quick file, call him Fred. So this never existed before. I just created this in my graphics program or whatever, and I hit File, Save, and I put it in there. What permissions does Fred have? So let's right click on Fred and take a look. And you'll see that Fred has the exact same permissions as the folder itself. So this process where anything new just picks up the permissions of whatever it's in is known as inheritance. So inheritance is an important tool, and it's something we really need. So let's do it one more time, except this time I'm going to make a new folder inside videos. We'll call him Fred also. I'll spell it right. Now if I right click on this guy and hit security, you'll see that we still have the same NTFS permission. So inheritance works for files, it works for folders. If you've got a folder with a certain set of permissions, anything new that you put in there is going to pick up those permissions. Inheritance is a good thing. Now, inheritance, there are some rare situations where you might want to say, look, I might be putting more stuff in here, but I don't want this inheritance thing. So let me show you what that's all about. So what I have here is I've got, let's go ahead and cancel this. So here in this Fred folder, let me go right back. I'm going to select Properties, go into Security. And for some reason, anything underneath this Fred folder, I don't want that inheritance to go anymore. So what I can do in that case is I can click on Edit, and that's what these little deny buttons are for. The deny checkbox say, look, anything from here on down, stop the inheritance for those particular permissions. Generally, using the deny button is pretty much proof that you haven't organized your folders well and you're not doing your NTFS right. But there are situations where it might be needed, so be aware that the deny button turns off inheritance. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about with NTFS is the idea of, well, I've got this folder and it's got a number of files and folders within it that have these different NTFS permissions. What happens if I move it or copy it? So this action varies depending on how you're moving and copying, and whether you're moving or copying even. Now, before we get too deep in this, I will make it easy for you. If you have something with NTFS permissions and you copy it to like a thumb drive with exFAT or FAT32, that's easy. When you copy it over there, all the permissions go away because FAT doesn't support NTFS permissions. Where things get a little bit more challenging is when you're moving and copying within different NTFS formatted partitions. To help you understand the issues with moving and copying in NTFS permissions, what I have here are two physical drives. Now, for demonstration, I'll say this is drive C and this is drive D. What's important is that they are different drive letters. Now, to get ourselves started, I've got this little orange cube here, and his job is to act as an object. He could be a file, he could be a folder. I don't really care what he is. He is an NTFS object that has NTFS permissions. This little purple cylinder is going to be the actual NTFS permissions that are on the original of this object, whatever it might be. So let's start doing some moving and copying. First of all, if we copy from one drive letter to another, the copy will end up over here, but it does not keep its NTFS permissions. It will take on whatever NTFS permissions are in the folder that it gets copied into. Now, if we move it, when you move it, he loses all of his NTFS permissions, and again, he takes on whatever permissions are in the folder he gets copied to. Now, things change a little bit when you're moving and copying within the same drive letter. If we're going to make a copy, when you copy it like this, he'll go ahead and you'll get the copy, but again, he'll lose his NTFS permissions. If you move it, this is the only time out of all four of these little things we've just done where the NTFS permissions actually go along with the object itself. The reason I'm harping on this is pretty simple. We know that CompTIA wants you to know it from the objectives, and we know that it's an issue that comes up with people time and time again. So NTFS permissions are powerful and amazing tools, and to be honest with you, we've really just barely touched on it, mainly because CompTIA only asks for a small amount. You'd have to be going into your MCSEs to really tear it apart. But for the A+ exam, make sure you're comfortable with your different NTFS permissions, and make sure you're comfortable with what happens with NTFS permissions when you move them and copy them.